Welcome to today's episode of the Auburn Daily Show and or podcast. I want to thank everybody out there for checking us out for another day and appreciate your patience for a little bit more of an erratic schedule for holiday week. I'd also kind of mentioned last episode I've been under the weather, had some food poisoning. You might be hearing my voice. We got some crazy sinus stuff going on, but regardless, for the people, the show will go on no matter what. And we are back with our reoccurring show guest, Auburn's man of mystery, the fighter of all hot takes. As always, we have Pat Barnes on here. And before we get too far into it, because this is the most topical of show sponsors ever, tell me after last weekend, Pat, how bad did you need a rage room?
I really could have used one. I don't know if rage room. I don't know if I really needed a rage room, but I needed some place to go just to decompress for probably about 24 hours and be alone in my thoughts. That's how I respond to trauma. But if I did have violent response to trauma, I would need a rage room bed.
There's probably some people who did, and there's probably I would be shocked if there wasn't a handful of Auburn fans that broke some household items, whether those be pool sticks, televisions, stuff in the kitchen. I mean, whatever. Something got smashed somewhere within the Auburn Nation.
I would agree. There was high demand for the rage room. Is would be my guess this past Sunday.
High demand. So we want to tell everybody out there, if you still got some, if that New Mexico State game is still just on you hard, and I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of on me hard. Like, I'm not over it. Just go if you're in the Auburn Opelika area, just Google Opelika Rage Room. Go pay them a visit. It's a great time to do it. If you're in the Birmingham area, have no fear. There is a second location up there, the Birmingham Rage Room. They can also help you out, whether it be for the New Mexico State game. Maybe it could be impending doom for the Iron Bowl. Maybe you just want to book maybe you just want to hedge your bets and book a session for Sunday because of what might happen for this Iron Bowl. Not a bad idea. They do have a 24-hour cancellation policy. They didn't want me to mention that. So you could totally do that. You win the Iron Bowl, say, hey, I'm canceling my session. Auburn won. If not, it's already there waiting for you. But all jokes aside, we want to thank them for being an awesome show sponsor for us. And like I said, if you're in either of those two areas, make sure to go check them out. Now, Pat, we already kind of teased it with our ad read. We got to talk about, and you haven't given your thoughts on it yet, New Mexico State.
Do I have to?
You got something to say, and the people need to hear it.
I have never been shook after a loss like I was after this last loss. And I think that's for multiple reasons. Obviously, our head coach is a guy I believe in. I still believe in him, but I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a little bit affected after this past weekend. And I just gotten so used to beating group. I mean, when's the last time we had lost to a group of 5 team?
I think
it's been years.
I think it was Southern Miss.
Yeah.
And it might have been like I don't know if we were even alive or if we were like literally a year old, if that.
Yeah, I wasn't paying attention to football. I know that because that would stuck out to me.
Because you couldn't walk.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see here. I know they gotten Southern Miss, but one of the losses they had to Southern Miss was like literally Brett Favre.
Yeah, that was it. It was Brett Favre that we lost to.
So it's like you could put an asterisk by that because it's like, okay, you lost to a future Hall of Famer, Super Bowl winning quarterback. So they lost in October 5th, 91, 9-10. And then they lost in 1990, 12-3. So literally both of those games were by 1 point. It was the end of Pat Dye's time at Auburn. And once again, they were 1 point, not 3 touchdowns.
Even worse than losing to New Mexico State is the fact that we got our ass absolutely beat by New Mexico State, which is still the most shocking part of all this to me, was that how bad we got whooped on the line of scrimmages on both sides of the field. So I'm pretty affected by it. How affected by it are you? It sounds like you're pretty messed up by it too.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those deals where it was just, and I know we were texting about this because they did the time possession thing, new clock rules. They kept the ball the entirety of the first quarter. Auburn had 1 3 and out, and then Auburn got the ball back with like a minute left in the first quarter. So they essentially had the ball, I want to say, probably I'm just spitballing off the top of my head here, at least 12 minutes of that first quarter, maybe
Yeah,
11 best case scenario. So Auburn essentially didn't have a chance to even get the ball to start the game, and they might have even had a just untimely penalty or something too. That was another thing too. It wasn't just like the penalties because they both had 75 yards. So on paper, now that's not including the no calls. We can get into that, but the the deal there was they just never got in any sort of rhythm. And I thought after that little fight debacle of them, the
me
quarterback
too.
throwing, I was like, that's going to light him up.
I
That's going to wake
same
him up.
thing. I told my wife as soon as that happened, I was like, "Well, that's game right there. They shouldn't have done that." Shocked that we did not respond to that like I thought we would.
Yeah, I thought because I mean sometimes these games get you sleeping in time. It just is what it is. But it's they at no point during that game woke up. The only players I thought gave any. I said this in my solo recap episode. So if you heard that, I'm going to recap this. If you haven't heard that, this is my take on it. I genuinely believe the only players that I really felt like were giving conceded effort consistently through the game were Keontae Scott, Peyton Thorne, and I'll even give a little asterisk for Keldrick Falk.
Yeah,
But
Falk made a couple plays.
outside of them, and this is the analogy that I said, and I'm going to get with it. It felt like everybody's just running with peanut butter in their shoes.
Rivaldo had a nice game
Okay,
when he
yeah,
was there too.
that's true. Rivaldo did make some plays, yeah, but I mean, but also to a tight end, he can only make plays when he's getting the ball.
Right. So outside of those
So,
four, I agree. Nobody stuck out to me saying, "Hey, this guy's trying to win this football game."
and especially on the defensive side,
mm,
and that was the
mm.
worst because that had not really been a issue with Auburn consistently, at least
Yeah.
not effort wise, and it was two things too. It was one, like I said, just very untimely penalties for Auburn or no calls. Like I said, that pass with VAR, I don't know how in the world that was not called a pass interference.
That's crazy.
I was shooting in that end zone, so I was pretty much I had the right angle of that, and I mean the guy extended two arms on his back and like pushed forward, and VAR falls as the ball is coming their way. There are two refs standing there and nothing. That was
It's
and
one
that
of
was
the
one of
most poorly ref games I've ever seen. And
and that
it
was
kind of went both ways, but it seemed like, and I know that I think they had more penalties and penalty yards, but it felt like the penalties they were giving and not giving to us were of greater impact. And maybe that's just me being an Auburn fan and I'm
no,
biased.
I think so too. Because I mean, the penalty yardage was both 75, but the deal with the fact that, like I said, that missed pass interference call, and then of course the fumble, and it's like, oh, we blew this play dead. Like, I mean, that was the earliest whistle you're
Yeah.
ever going to see on the entire planet, and it was just like, okay, we just blew this play dead just because, even though it was clearly a fumble. There's a ref sitting right there. It was wild how that ended up happening. And then the fake punt, they essentially just let the guy walk in there.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And then two, when New Mexico State is when they do get penalties and they're in a long down in situation, just Auburn let him get it. All
Yeah.
right, it's 3rd and 18. Oh, yep, he got it, whatever it was. And then their receivers are over here getting these just highlight reel Randy Moss like big toe flicking a blade of grass and going out the sideline. It was like they got multiple of those type catches. It was like that was defended and like the guy just made these insane plays on it, and then no one for Auburn could remotely. There wasn't aside from the Rivaldo catch for the touchdown. I can't really think of any big or even medium play Auburn really made this game.
No, I agree. And I guess the bigger issue here, probably something that kind of opened my eyes a little bit was, and I never was a big believer in the freeze blows games he should win narrative, frankly, because he was at Ole Miss the whole time. And I just, maybe I'm wrong for thinking this. I think Ole Miss is a lesser program. And everybody always pointed back to that Memphis game in 2015. Well, people don't remember that Memphis team was a top 10 team for a long time. And I think we were their only loss in the season, if I remember correctly. Maybe they had another loss in there. But this is the first time I've truly felt, hey, he may have an issue getting his team up for a game that's truly should be low stakes like that game was.
Well, there was a year, I think in 2016, maybe. I think they 2015 Memphis was 9-4.
I thought they were better than that.
They were 9-4.
They were a top 25 team for a lot of that year. They weren't a bad team. I mean, we beat them in that bowl game, but we were better in our record if we had a better quarterback. We would have had a better record than we did with a better quarterback situation. So
Memphis lost to, and this is the end of the season. I don't know if they had an injury or something here, but they lost to Navy, Houston, Temple, beat SMU, then of course Auburn. So,
okay.
but yeah, that was the deal there. But I believe in 2016, if memory serves, I'm gonna see if I can look this up real quick before getting too much time.
Well, they were a
Ole
5-7 team in 2016 as well. It's not like Ole Miss was a good team.
But what I'm trying to get at there is kind of that narrative of I believe they beat Georgia that year,
They
and then
did.
they end up losing to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, but you know what Georgia's record was that year? 7-5. So they weren't a great team.
Oh, right. They were ranked number 12 at the time. But point being, the principle there of, I mean, you could even say they beat a decent A&M team that was number 10. That Hugh Freeze there is some tendency, and there's a few of them even at Liberty you can kind of maybe argue. It's a little different case study there of they've got no business showing that you can consistently beat teams that are at your level or above your level. I mean, even you could look at 2016. They the score to the Alabama game that year was 43-48.
Yeah. Well, there's no denying. This is all semantics at this point because there's no denying after Saturday that he's got an issue with it, and that has to be fixed immediately. That losing to a team that were 20-point favorites over in Jordan Hare can never happen again.
100%, especially group of 5 or anything. And even this Georgia Southern that year in 2016, Hugh Freeze, I mean, that was a 10-point game. That was 37-27. I would be shocked to say that wasn't quite a larger spread than that. So, yeah, and you're right. I don't know what what there is to that. I don't know if it was with the players, the assistants. There was hey, we got to ride this recruiting wave of the past 3 weeks we've had. Something happened because, like I said, that wasn't like a close. Oh, they made a 60-yard field goal with 2 seconds left to win the. It was
no. We got wore out. We got wore out.
Yeah, and my thing about it is, what if you switch Arkansas and the New Mexico State game? Everything about the games.
Like we
How do you
beat
feel about that?
New Mexico State.
How you beat Arkansas exactly, like literally everything plays out
48-10.
exactly the same, and then you lose to Arkansas. How you lost to New Mexico State?
I'd probably feel. I don't know. I kind of feel differently about it. I think we beat New Mexico State 9 out of 10 times we play that game.
I would agree with that.
So it doesn't affect the loss in Mexico State doesn't affect me in the sense that, hey, this team is worse than I thought. It affects me in the sense that I am worried in future seasons if Freeze takes his foot off the gas against a lesser opponent again.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't say it really changes my feelings one way or the other, but it does give me pause for concern in the future when we're playing a team we should beat, I would say.
Because here's going to be the deal for Hugh Freeze and what has to happen with Auburn and what the whole post-Gus letting go deal is certain things have to happen to get over the hump. And you saw this even going back with Tuberville. You saw this with Gus a handful of times, and Harsin never even got a chance to get there. But you have, and this is the success that Saban has had. This is the success Kirby has had. And really, I'd say the only slip up Kirby's had is the 2019 South Carolina game.
Yeah.
But you beat teams. If you always beat teams you are supposed to beat, you have an incredibly high floor.
Right.
And the problem is you have years where you are in the driver's seat for a strong postseason, and then you lose to a team you had no business losing to, and it derails the entire thing.
Well, that's what everybody was kind of worried about too. Was that Freeze was a lot like Tuberville in that way, because Tuberville had a tendency to do this too.
He'd always beat teams he shouldn't have beaten and lose the ones he shouldn't have. Oh yeah,
right. But Gus is the opposite. You know, Gus had that rock solid 6-7 win floor. He was always going to beat the teams that we had more talent than, because Gus completely relied on execution and his players being more talented than the guys across from him. So when we would play the Ole Miss, Mississippi State's, Arkansas of the world, we would win almost every time. When we played Bama, Georgia, LSU, we would lose almost every time. We've got Freeze's history now looks to be opposite. It's on him. to change that narrative going forward.
Yeah, and there's definitely some soul searching there for sure. So let's kind of keep rolling with this conversation to fit with the theme of the episode here. With what happened with New Mexico State, and I kind of said, and I teased a little bit with the Arkansas switch, because I think that if you had swapped those, I can't decide if I would feel better or worse. Like, oh, we lost to Arkansas team, but we beat up on New Mexico State, or we beat the brakes off Arkansas, lost this team. It's almost like we're a better team that was just caught sleeping, or we performed kind of how we thought. And I don't know, because I think one has a scarier path than the other,
I
to
think
where
I agree with that, but I also think the one that has a scarier path is more easily fixed, if that makes sense.
right. No, I agree. And that's kind of where I'm trying to take this here is like, if you can right the ship, you've shown that, hey, we're better than this. We were just caught sleeping. We're awake now. We're back. Or it is, there is something chronic causing this problem. And who knows, maybe it's players checked out. Maybe it was Houston, whatever, insert conspiracy theory. But if something is genuinely going on, then is there a bigger thing behind the scenes that we don't know about that slipped out in a horrific moment that will forever kind of mar it? And we can hope not. I mean, we hope that it's not that, but let's kind of go into the domino effect of this. So what happened in Mexico State did happen. And there is pretty much, it's inexcusable. There's not an excuse. There's not a reason. This is generally the healthiest this team has been all year.
Yeah.
And that happened. Well, you took all the wind out of your sails going to the Iron Bowl, unless you have the crazy rat poison effect of Alabama. Like, this team lost to Mexico State, we're going to whoop them up. And you kind of do, you have a reversal effect of what happened there, which would be hilarious. I mean, that would be just incredible narrative. But let's keep it grounded in reality here. The Iron Bowl is a 15-point spread as of right now. Don't think it's going to be looking fantastic for Auburn.
Oh, I think we're covering.
Okay.
See, I think it's way too early. I need to see Saturday before I say this took the wind out of our sails, because I think it's easily explainable to that team. Hey, I was sleeping. We were all sleeping. You're better than this. So I need to see how they respond Saturday before I can say this took all the wind out of our sails.
For me, what I'm nervous, the wind I'm talking about is not even less the players, but that raucous environment that the fans would have. Because if they went into this with a 4-game win streak with a just break speed all to Mexico State, there's a lot of fans that are going to be in there, and they're going to be booging hard, and they're going to be screaming and yelling and hooting and hollering, thinking they're going to beat Alabama.
I bet it's still loud, man. Remember 2021, we were on the 2-3 game losing streak, losing games we shouldn't have, and it was crazy in there still.
I can hope so. And I was at that game, and it was. And I hope that kind of energy comes. I just feel like you really roll the dice of, it's like you poured a glass of water on a campfire. Is it going to hold, or is it going to start simmering out? I hope it does, but it's a dangerous risk that was taken. But anyway, if they can do it, that is going to be one of the biggest factors. Because Milroe has not really played in a hostile and away environment yet. I mean, Alabama's been very fortunate that their best games were at home. So that's kind of something that hasn't really been tested. I think the worst game they've had was A&M. And
yeah, that's correct.
Like, they haven't really had a tough away environment. It always seems to happen for Alabama. Lucky them. The time they do play a team away, they either got an injury or it's like a super down year for them. So, here we are. So, yeah, I mean, Mississippi State, not exactly a hostile environment away. A&M can be, and that was still a less than 1-score game. And then Kentucky. So, can that environment throw off what they're trying to do? Can it be loud? Can they do the thing early? Maybe so. And I think that crowd energy, not only one to get in Alabama's head and distract the calls and signals that they're trying to do, but maybe hype Auburn up a little bit. If that can happen, then yeah, I think they could cover the spread, absolutely. But let's just say, for conversation's sake, if this season kind of snowballs poorly, and we'll just say they lose by about the spread, we'll say 2 touchdowns. What happened in Mexico State, lose by 2 touchdowns, you're probably playing in like a Birmingham-esque bowl again.
They say it's going to be better than that.
Okay, what do you say, Music City Bowl?
The Music City and Texas Bowl are the two I'm seeing the most.
Do they have any projected opponents for any of these yet?
Yeah, Music City was Northwestern, who we would beat like a drum if we played them. And then Texas Bowl was against Oklahoma, which we would get beat like a drum.
Okay, so
So,
yeah,
but
we don't.
it's not going to be Birmingham. I think it's almost surely not going to be the Birmingham Bowl.
Well, so a few things there. Do we think how the season could end puts more pressure? Assuming, like I said, now if you beat Alabama, all bets are off. It just will be that way. But if it's about a 2-touchdown loss to Alabama, just to keep it fair with Vegas, do we think that this puts a little bit more pressure on Hugh Freeze going into year 2 for on the field performance?
Who I guess my question is, what pressure are you talking about? Because I don't know for the people that matter in recruiting. No, I do not think that even if we lost both these, even if we lost the Iron Bowl as predicted by 15 points, even if we lost the bowl game, I don't think the people calling the shots, and I don't think recruiting is going to be affected by it. Now I know you probably feel differently about that, but I don't think either one of those things are going to be affected. Now fans on the internet may be upset.
Well, I'm
But
just trying to get at here, and just for the sake of conversation, is there some ill will? Does the bar have to be raising, hey, even by the most graceful of realistic standards, this year was you kind of fell short, and it fell short in a bad way, especially with this game. We're going to need to
it
see
would
a
not
little bit
have fallen
more.
short had they not lost this past game. And I understand that's a huge factor. It's a huge change from projected. But like I said, I think you can almost explain it like, hey, we were caught sleeping. It wasn't because they were a better team. It's not something we can't dig out of easily. We have to change how we prepare for these games. That is
So I
something that can be done.
So I think it goes two ways here, and this is just my opinion on for this year, kind of rolling next year. I think if you obviously beat Alabama, all bets are off. If you play very competitively with Alabama and keep it within the spread, or even Georgia, keep it a 1-score game, and or you come out and you win pretty handily a bowl game, I think it does erase that just because from the perception, it looks like, all right, they had a step back, but they move forward.
Erase from
But
who, though? Who are you talking about erase? It erases what from who?
just the perception of this loss,
Yeah, but
the
what you got to understand is that this loss doesn't matter to the people in charge that are going to make this decision unless he does it again.
right, but what I'm trying to get at though is Auburn fans have, I think, and even power brokers, you could say, have a little bit of a pendulum problem to where they jump from extremes way too fast. It is we're overly optimistic about everything. Everything's fine to the house is burning. I think there's not quite a happy middle ground, and maybe that's just my opinion on it. And I said this is a group discussion. It's
I
a
think
debate,
this is a different Auburn than what we've had the last 15 years. That's
and we can
I think that's what it comes down to.
hope so because I mean I guess what I don't want to see happen is everybody be like, "Oh, we're fine. It's not a problem at all. This is all good." And then a little something happens, and then it's just like, the alarm goes off. And it's like, is there not a middle ground that folks can take of like, "Hey, this is kind of the standard we need to get. There was a slight setback. Drop a gear a little bit and play catch up." Because I just have a hard time believing, and this is like I said, I know we differ in opinion here. Of just, I don't like the idea of, hey, we wrote the year off. Hey, this doesn't matter. None of it matters. I think it matters now. The debate to what extent and what has to be done to write it. But I think because of this, now I will say this: if it goes to obviously New Mexico State, let's say it's a bad loss to an Iron Bowl and another stupid bowl loss, I think that definitely throttles up. Hey, the bar has to be risen for year 2 because of where it fell short from year 1.
Where I disagree with that is I think the results of this year mattered to the effect that it lent to us with that we did what we needed to do recruiting. Because the only way we're getting back to what Auburn should be is by recruiting effectively. And all signs right now point to that loss had zero effect on any of that.
Now I will agree with that. Now let's get to this here though, where I think where it also factors in year 2. Let's say they absolutely hit it out of the water with recruiting high school kids and or bringing in like very highly touted portal guys. I think that even puts more pressure because it's like, okay, now it's, excuse me, it's your guys in there. It is more talented guys than have been there. So the whole, oh, we don't have the talent deal. And yes, it will have to compound. And I'm not saying it's in the end all be all in year 2, but I think by the time year 2 and or 3 comes, there's going to have to start being, and I don't know exactly what that bar is, and that could be something to be talked about for the rest of the offseason. But I think there's going to have to be some more tangible results before we sit there and say, like, what's the deal here? Because it's very looking like there's going to be a lot of coaching turnover with assistants, very likely Philip Montgomery. I'm sure Roberts is fine. I think everybody kind of dropped the ball on that one. I wouldn't really be kind of clamoring for his job unless this started to be the defensive thing continue to happen. And one game is just one game, but
I think you may be reading a little bit too much into what this loss means.
I am not reading it. I'm playing kind of the what if game here. I'm not reading into anything.
There's like so many steps you have to reach in order to get to the point where you're talking about right now.
Right. I'm saying I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm not saying, oh, this will happen. I'm just saying if these things do happen for conversation's sake, then you got the issue. If it is, like I said, oh, the Iron Bowl goes this way or you win a good bowl game, then I do think you kind of, yes, it will always be a black mark historically, but I think it's kind of short-term and medium-term impact. It don't have to worry about. The only issue this loss would ever have is it'll just be made fun of down the road, kind of like La Monroe was for Alabama.
Right.
I said this the other day on another episode, and I'm going to repeat it here. I don't think that you could. I think it's silly to compare this to and I've said this to the La Monroe loss because Saban gets the benefit of that doubt because one, Saban already had a national championship, and two, Saban won a national championship 2 years later. So yes, in hindsight, you can say that, but you could also say this is the Chad Morris North Texas loss. Like Hugh Freeze has to do the right things. He has to respond to this loss in a big way to actually have that comparison to the La Monroe loss. It's like, hey, we were a better team with a better coaching and a better staff versus like, oh, it was a Chad Morris loss. It's just a bad coach. Now, I'm not saying he is Chad Morris. I'm not saying he's Nick Saban. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle here.
The good news is that Freeze has 9 years of history to show what type of coach he is, though. This isn't somebody that we're taking a gamble on. It's like we don't know what this guy's going to be.
Right. And I think what he has to do here is he has to respond and say, hey, I am not only what I had been at my best, but I'm working to be better. And I still think there is more. He's got to show that now.
Yeah, agreed.
We've seen it in recruiting.
But he would have had to do that anyway. Like we would have had to improve next year anyway.
100%. But I think there's a little bit more heat. You could debate how much more this, that, or another, but I think there should be a little bit more eyes on saying, hey, like this, and as you said it earlier, this cannot happen again.
I don't think it becomes an issue unless we have another loss like this in the future. If we have another loss like this in the future, that's when this becomes an issue, I think.
Right. And it was said, and I forget exactly who said it, but this was Hugh's kind of get out of jail free card. Hey, it was your beginning here. It's kind of your mulligan. I don't think anybody's realistically should be holding this, and kind of like I said, unless just everything implodes, really, minus just it being a laughing point for a long time, it's probably not going to really be an issue, especially if this team gets up and shows what they should do against Alabama. But I do think you got to really come out next season, or even if you got a bowl team that, like you said, a Northwestern that you should absolutely beat the brakes off of and just say, hey, never again. And we're going to double the spread of what we should beat somebody to kind of prove that we're going to do what you did against Arkansas to kind of against somebody else and say, hey, and I think Pablo had mentioned this point on Slander U podcast he was doing. And this is just the most Java thing ever. And I'm kind of butchering the exact stat line of it. I'm kind of doing this from memory, but it's basically like, I think it's like since like 1980 or 79, there has never been a team that has like won by such a great margin on a spread to lose by such a great margin on the spread, like week to week ever.
That's what happens with a thin team with not a ton of talent who's improving, and they improved at a rapid pace and they took a game off. I think. I think this is a function of the lack of talent on the roster more than anything else.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it also too. I mean, we just got to look at there. I mean, there's like a point of lack of leadership.
Yeah, that's it.
Somebody didn't. I mean, a lot of people, and Jason Jones even mentioned on Zach Blackerby's podcast, the Locked on Auburn, when he interviewed him. I mean, Jason was just like, I thought from a. He's like, there are a lot of people to kind of jump to play the coaches, but he's like, from a scheme standpoint, he's like, I think we called it perfectly. He's like, I don't know anything else that the coaches could have done. He's like, I wouldn't have called anything any different.
Yeah.
So that to me also goes to confirm the fact that the players were sleeping. It wasn't like, why are we blitzing this guy or why are we in this coverage for what they're doing here? Like, I think it's safe to say Jason Jones probably knows a fair amount about football scheme at this level now.
I do disagree with Jason Jones that I think I may have seen the worst defensive call I've ever seen in my life this past weekend from Ron Roberts on that 3rd and long that was a touchdown.
Which one?
The safety blitz where the guy just walks right into the end zone where the safety should have been, like 3rd and 19. It was 3rd and goal, but they had to go 19 yards.
Well, that was another issue too. Was why could that line not get any pressure to where you had to bring in safeties constantly? I mean, they're doing that the whole game.
Yeah.
So I
I'm
mean,
just saying that my point of that was, I believe that he said that I'm glad that he's taking ownership as a player, but it wasn't like a perfectly called game. Like that call on its own was quite possibly the worst defensive call I've ever seen a coach make.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of wonder too, if you're a coach and you're sitting there and you're looking to just like, at what point do you just throw your hands up and just be like, nothing's going to work here? Because I mean, you're coaching in the pads, like they're not out there playing. I mean, it's just like, and obviously he's in the booth, so he can't really get down there and yell at him. But I don't know. I mean, that had to have been just one of the most fever dream-esque moments for that whole staff to deal with.
Well, I know I was. I don't know how Marcus Harris can go from just being a bull in a china shop against Georgia, collapsing the entire side of their line to get zero pressure. I mean, that's all effort at the end of the day.
Okay, so let's take this angle of it. Do you take this loss to get Marcus Harris to come back next year?
I think he's gone regardless. But I mean, if it meant losing this to bring Marcus Harris back next year, no, I would rather have beaten New Mexico State.
That's not that worth it.
Yeah, no.
Who knows? I mean, maybe there'd be. I agree with you. I think he's probably going to be gone there. But yeah, that's a.
I hope he comes back.
Yeah, they'll be all for it. But that is the wild part, that there's not a. It wasn't like it was a player position group. I mean, it really was a full team effort, and I hope that they do some soul searching. I hope they woke up, and I've heard the narrative, and I don't want to bog hard enough to believe this, but I will just state it. Maybe this was the best thing for them going into the Iron Bowl. Maybe they can actually respond from this. Who knows? I mean, in 2014, you had the butt fumble that took the wind out of the sails, and they played their hearts out against Alabama, that 2014 Iron Bowl. So we'll see how they respond. And then obviously we'll see how the coaching staff does and everything that they can shake and bake and make up for everything and get the wheels spinning in the right direction for year 2. Pat, do you have any other closing thoughts about kind of what we think this is gonna look like for Auburn bouncing back from this loss going forward?
I would say my only thoughts are it was a devastating loss from a fan's perspective. There's zero doubt about that. We had no business losing that game. It doesn't look like it affected recruiting, which is the most important thing going this year. Everything that the primary objective of this year was to show enough to be able to land the players that we needed to land to be a successful program in the future. Mm-hmm. Looks like we're still on track for that. So bullet dodge there. That type of loss can never happen again.
Well,
that's my final thoughts on it.
That's it. The get out of jail free card has been used. I think you continue to business. You wake the team up. You do what you should have done all along with Alabama. Whatever bowl you get in, absolutely take care of business. Kill it with early signing day. Kill it in the portal. And then I think this is going to be a distant memory. And if Auburn really, whatever the bar is, over exceeds it for year 2, then I think you have got insane momentum rolling into year 3, assuming that this 2025 recruiting continues on the momentum that 2024 is, and they can close all those things strong. So let's hope that's what they do. That is what we're hoping for and cheering for here the Auburn Daily Show. I want to thank everybody for listening once again. We will be off tomorrow for Thanksgiving. We'll be back Friday with our guy Andrew Stefaniak, probably talking a little bit more Iron Bowl there. And then we are all crossing our fingers, hoping that we're going to have an awesome Iron Bowl post-game show. That's included with me. It's your host, Alex, better known on the socials at Auburn Memes. That is where you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, or X. I think they call it X now. Want to thank Pat Barnes. Like I said, he's got his mask on. You don't know where to find Pat Barnes. If you want to find him, say something really stupid out there, and maybe he'll find you. That's going to conclude us today. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll be right back at you with our episode on Friday.